So now that we're underneath the car, you can see that there's a few other things that are a little bit different. Obviously up front, I have the white line sway bars. Now, the original sway bars on a Forester are the same size as the front sway bars on a STI. So there'd be no upgrade to take the STI sway bar, front sway bar, and put it on the Forester. Now the rear sway bar on the STI is thicker. So you can, and that is a good upgrade to do if you're on a budget. You can go to the STI rear sway bar, which is what I did first on this car before going to the white lines in the front and rear. Now you can see that I also have the end links. You have to upgrade the end links for the heavier sway bar for this size sway bar anyway, just because the sway bar is strong enough to snap the stock end links. So you need to swap those out, and a lot of the sway bar kits that you'll see on other cars will include end links as well. But so those are aftermarket. These are Cartboy end links with the white line sway bars. Now, something that you can't tell from looking at it, but the steering rack is also off of an STI. Now, the reason that it's worthwhile to do this swap is on the Forester, the ratio is wider in the center of the rack. So the result is it makes the car less twitchy, less responsive. So it's good to have on a car like a typical grocery getter crossover, but on a sports car, you definitely want something that has a consistent ratio throughout the entire range of the steering rack. So going to the STI steering rack is a significant upgrade for this car. It's probably one of the biggest, or one of my favorite upgrades for this car. Now, one of the other things that you can see, and I'm going to move the camera again here, is the equal length headers. So the equal length headers, what that means is the distance from the driver's side exhaust port to the turbo compared to the passenger side exhaust port to the turbo. It's the same distance. So now normally on a Subaru, they're unequal. So this side is much closer to the turbo than the other side. That's one of the things that gives the Subaru the very iconic kind of lumpy sound that they have. Now, changing out to the equal length header did change the sound. In my opinion, it doesn't sound as good as it did when it was stock, but it doesn't sound bad. A lot of people say, oh, you're going to change it, it's going to sound like a Honda. Well, you're comparing an inline four-cylinder that you have in a Honda to a horizontally opposed four-cylinder, so it's still going to sound different. Now, it does sound a little more linear, more smooth, which is more familiar to kind of the inline four sound, but it's definitely a worthwhile improvement. And the benefit of going to this kind of setup is you get much more even exhaust pressure getting to the turbo, so your turbo spools up faster. Now, the end result isn't a whole lot of peak horsepower increase because they flow not that much better. They flow better, but they're not that much better than the stock header. But in the low RPM range, because the turbo spools faster, you have more power from the turbocharger, more boost in the lower RPM range, a little better throttle response. So there's definitely a very good upgrade in going to this. Now, something to keep in mind, and this is specific to the Forester, is if I go over here, you can't really see it, but the oil cooler. The oil cooler had to get changed. So that's what the oil filter right here is connected to the oil cooler. So what that is a STI oil cooler versus the Forester oil cooler. And the reason that it had to change is there used to be interference. It didn't clear. There wasn't enough room for the equal length header to clear with the Forester oil filter. So that was kind of a pain to change, but had to be done. So definitely make sure if you're considering doing this upgrade, do your research and get all your parts, because I did not. I'll be the first one to admit that. Got the car up in the air, got the headers off, and then put the new headers on, and they didn't fit. So the car ended up sitting up in the air for a little while without doing anything to it, which is never fun waiting on parts because I got impatient. So, but you can see that the headers are wrapped all the way around, and the up pipe is wrapped as well, though you can barely see it going up to the turbo. And then on the downpipe side, you can see the downpipe right there. It is wrapped as well, going back to the NER spec exhaust by Blitz. So I'm going to go around back now and show you the differences and what had to be done on that side. So now that we're out back, you can see that there's a few other changes that had to be made to the car to make everything fit just right. Now, one of the things that is a good upgrade to do, very similar to the end link swap up front to make sure that it doesn't break. Out back, we've got the larger sway bar. It's adjustable just like it is up front. Now, rather than changing only the end links, you also need to change the rear sway bar brackets, these mounts right here. The factory mounts are very weak, so especially for such a large sway bar like what I have now, so it's definitely important to upgrade those, otherwise your sway bar might rip itself out of the bottom of the chassis. So that's definitely an important thing to do. Now, one of the other things that we had to do to get the exhaust to fit quite right, because the exhaust is not a Forester specific exhaust, it's an Impreza exhaust. And so you can see here where there are some welds going right before the muffler. So, and what that did is this extended the muffler, and then we changed the mounting brackets, these hangers. We changed them as well to allow the muffler to sit low, a little bit lower. So, because one of the issues is that the Forester, even though the chassis is the same, so it has the same wheelbase and the width, track width and everything's the same. Problem is, because it's more of a crossover and wagon kind of setup, is longer. So we had to add that much to the length of the exhaust to keep it from just melting off the bumper. So when I first put it on, it did already melt some of it a little bit, but we just trimmed that away and no problems. So just a few hangers and everything was ready to go. Now you can see there is one hanger up there that's not being used, but it hardly moves, so I never really bothered to create another hanger. But so anyway, that's that. Oh, that was my quick Forester summary. I'd like to thank you all for watching. If you have any other questions about the car or something that you saw in the video, please don't hesitate to leave us a message and we'll try to answer your question. If you have any other suggestions about what you want to see in the future for this car, for any other car that you've seen on our channel, let us know and we'll try to make it happen. Our goal here is only to provide you with information that you might need to be able to go out there or give you the confidence that you need to go out and do this kind of stuff yourself and just have fun. Thanks again for watching.